I attended my own funeral, and the man who loved me most never knew I was standing less than 100 yards away. The rain fell in slow silver lines across the cemetery, turning the grass dark and glossy beneath the gray October sky. I stood beneath a large maple tree near the back of the property, my hands buried deep inside the pockets of an old wool coat that no longer felt warm enough. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and fresh flowers. White roses. Hundreds of them. They covered the grave like snow. My grave. At least that was what the polished marble headstone claimed. Olivia Carter. Beloved daughter. Beloved friend. Gone too soon. I stared at the engraved letters until they blurred. 6 years ago, seeing my own name carved into stone would have seemed impossible. Now it felt strangely ordinary. The pastor's voice drifted across the crowd, soft and respectful. People bowed their heads. Some cried quietly. Others stared at the ground. Most of them believed they were saying goodbye forever. I wished it were that simple. I wished grief followed rules. I wished love did too. Then I saw him. Ethan Sterling stood alone at the front of the gathering. 6 feet 3 inches tall. Broad shoulders hidden beneath a black overcoat tailored so perfectly it looked untouched by the rain. His dark hair was damp. His jaw was tense. He looked older than 35. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying years he was never meant to survive. The billionaire who appeared on magazine covers. The CEO who could move markets with a single decision. The man every news channel called unstoppable. None of them knew what I knew. Ethan Sterling had been broken a long time ago. He never looked at the crowd. He never acknowledged the reporters standing beyond the cemetery gates. He never noticed the dozens of people watching him. His eyes remained fixed on the grave. On me. Or at least on the version of me he believed was buried there. A cold ache settled in my chest. 6 years. 6 years of hiding. 6 years of pretending the past was dead. Yet one look at him and every wall I'd built began to crack. The pastor finished speaking. People started leaving. Umbrellas opened. Cars pulled away. Conversations faded into the distance. Ethan didn't move. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Eventually the cemetery was almost empty. Still he remained. The rain soaked his coat. Water rolled down his face. He didn't seem to notice. Slowly he stepped forward and knelt beside the grave. My breath caught. From inside his coat he removed a single white rose. Not from the enormous arrangements surrounding the stone. A separate flower. One he had brought himself. He placed it carefully against the marble and lowered his head. I couldn't hear what he said. Maybe it was a prayer. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was another promise he intended to keep. The wind shifted. For one impossible second, Ethan lifted his eyes toward the tree line. Toward me. My heart stopped. Every instinct screamed at me to run. To disappear before he could somehow recognize me. But he simply stared into the distance, lost in memories neither of us had escaped. Then he whispered something I could barely hear through the rain. I never let you go, Liv. Tears burned behind my eyes. Because the cruelest part wasn't that Ethan thought I was dead. The cruelest part was that after 6 years, I still loved him enough to wish he were right. I attended my own funeral because guilt is a strange thing. It does not disappear when you run. It follows you across state lines, into new apartments, new jobs, and new names. It sits beside you at breakfast. It whispers when the world is quiet. As the last car disappeared beyond the cemetery gates, I stepped farther back into the shadows and pulled my coat tighter around my body. My phone vibrated inside my pocket. I already knew who it was before I looked. Emily. The only person in the world who knew the truth. The only person who knew Olivia Carter was still alive. I answered without speaking. Please tell me you are already gone, she said. Her voice carried the familiar mixture of concern and frustration. "You promised you would not go." I watched Ethan from a distance. He was still kneeling beside the grave. Still talking to a woman who was not buried there. "I had to see him," I whispered. Silence filled the line. Then Emily sighed. "And now?" I did not answer immediately. Because now was the problem. Seeing Ethan was supposed to bring closure. Instead, it had reopened wounds I spent 6 years trying to bury. "Now I remember everything," I said softly. The drive back to town took almost 2 hours. Rain tapped against the windshield the entire way. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of me, surrounded by autumn trees glowing gold and red beneath the fading afternoon light. Normally, the drive helped clear my thoughts. Not today. Every mile only pulled me deeper into memories. 6 years earlier, my life had been painfully ordinary. I lived in a tiny apartment above a bakery in Boston. The floors creaked. The heater barely worked. My bank account lived in a constant state of panic. I taught art classes during the day and worked evenings at a community center to pay my student loans. It was not glamorous. But it was mine. Back then, I believed ordinary was enough. Then Ethan Sterling walked into my life. People always assume the wealthy arrive with noise. Expensive cars. Security teams. Headlines. Ethan did not. The first time I saw him, he was standing in the back of a crowded charity fundraiser wearing a navy suit and looking completely out of place. I remember thinking he seemed lonely. Not sad. Just isolated. Like someone attending a party while mentally somewhere else. I did not know his name. I did not know he owned half the skyline in Manhattan. I only knew he kept staring at a painting hanging on the wall. A painting nobody else seemed to notice. Mine. The memory made my chest tighten. I could still see the room. The string lights. The smell of coffee and fresh paint. The nervous excitement that came with displaying my work in public for the first time. I could still hear his voice when he finally approached me. Calm. Confident. Unexpectedly warm. "Did you paint that?" he had asked. I smiled despite myself as the memory played in my head. Because looking back now, it seemed impossible that one simple question could destroy and save a life at the same time. That should have been the end of it. A polite conversation beside a painting. Two strangers exchanging a few words before returning to their separate lives. Instead, Ethan stayed. He asked questions about my work. About the children I taught. About why every painting I created seemed to contain a window somewhere in the background. I remember laughing because nobody had ever noticed that before. Most people looked at colors. Ethan looked deeper. "Why windows?" he asked. I glanced at the painting hanging on the wall. A small girl standing beside a bright blue window. "Because they remind me that there is always somewhere else to go," I said. Something changed in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Like he understood exactly what I meant. We talked for 20 minutes. Then 40. The fundraiser faded around us. Guests came and went. Volunteers stacked chairs. Someone turned off half the lights. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. When he finally checked his watch, he looked genuinely disappointed. "I have an early flight tomorrow," he said. "That sounds important." He smiled. "Apparently people expect me to run a company." I laughed politely. At the time, I thought he was joking. Then he handed me a business card. Sterling Global. Chief Executive Officer. Ethan Sterling. My stomach nearly stopped working. Everybody knew that name. Newspapers knew that name. Financial channels knew that name. Even I knew that name. Suddenly every expensive detail about him made sense. The watch. The suit. The confidence. What did not make sense was why he had spent nearly an hour talking to an unknown art teacher. You look shocked, he said. You own half of Manhattan. His smile widened. Only the boring half. I should have walked away then. Our worlds were too different. People like Ethan existed in private jets and penthouses overlooking Central Park. People like me worried about rent and grocery bills. But before leaving, he asked one final question. Would you let me buy you coffee sometime? No grand gesture. No arrogance. No assumption that I would say yes. Just a simple question. Honest and unexpectedly nervous. Looking back, that was the moment everything changed. 3 days later we met at a small coffee shop near Boston Common. He arrived 5 minutes early. Ordered black coffee. Remembered my favorite pastry from a conversation I barely recalled having. By the second date, I found myself looking forward to his messages. By the third, I realized I smiled every time his name appeared on my phone. Ethan was nothing like the headlines. He listened more than he spoke. He remembered tiny details. He treated waiters, janitors, and executives exactly the same. For the first time in years, I stopped planning escape routes. I stopped expecting disappointment. I allowed myself to believe happiness might actually stay. What I did not know was that somewhere far beyond our quiet dinners and weekend walks, someone was already watching. Someone who believed I never belonged in Ethan Sterling's world. And someone willing to make sure I disappeared from it. For almost a year, life felt impossibly easy. Not perfect. Just real. Ethan flew across the country for meetings that seemed to last forever, yet somehow he always found time to call. Sometimes from airport terminals. Sometimes from the back of a car. Once from a rooftop in Chicago while snow fell around him. He never missed a birthday. Never forgot an anniversary. Never treated me like an accessory to his success. When I was with him, I felt seen. That terrified me more than I wanted to admit. Because people do not fear losing things they do not love. They fear losing the things that finally feel like home. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan invited me to a charity gala in New York. I almost said no. Events like that made me uncomfortable. Rooms filled with billionaires and politicians were not designed for women who still compared grocery prices. But Ethan squeezed my hand and smiled. Just come for 1 hour, he said. If you hate it, we leave. I agreed. That decision changed everything. The ballroom looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. Women in designer gowns. Men discussing acquisitions worth more money than I could imagine. I spent most of the evening trying not to spill anything or embarrass myself. Ethan stayed close beside me. Every time I started feeling out of place, he somehow knew. A reassuring touch on my shoulder. A quiet joke. A smile meant only for me. Then I met his mother. Victoria Sterling. Elegant. Intelligent. Impossibly composed. She greeted me warmly. Her smile was flawless. Her manners perfect. Everything about her suggested approval. Yet something felt wrong. I could not explain it. It was in the way her eyes lingered on me half a second too long. The way she asked questions without really listening to the answers. The way she seemed fascinated by every detail of my background. My family. My finances. My future. When the evening ended, I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe that. Unfortunately, instincts exist for a reason. 2 weeks later, a large envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. No explanation. Just my name typed neatly across the front. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it while drinking coffee before work. The mug slipped from my hand before I finished looking at the contents. Photographs. Printed emails. Screenshots of text messages. Every page pointed toward the same conclusion. Ethan was involved with another woman. At first I laughed. It seemed ridiculous. Impossible. Then I kept reading. More details. More evidence. Hotel reservations. Private conversations. Dates and times that appeared to match his business trips. My stomach twisted. I spent hours staring at those papers. Searching for flaws. Searching for proof they were fake. But heartbreak has a dangerous way of making lies appear believable. Especially when they are carefully designed. That night Ethan called 3 times. I watched the screen light up and let it ring. The next morning he sent flowers. I did not answer. By the 3rd day, doubt had become something heavier. Something harder to escape. And deep inside, a quiet voice began asking the question that would eventually destroy everything. What if the man I loved had never really existed at all? The worst part was not the evidence. It was the silence that followed. Ethan kept calling. Every morning. Every night. Sometimes he left messages. Sometimes he simply tried again. I listened to every voicemail and hated myself for it. Because his voice sounded exactly the same. Warm. Concerned. Confused. If he was lying, he was the best actor in the world. If he was innocent, I was destroying the only good thing that had ever happened to me. For days I barely slept. My apartment became a prison filled with unanswered questions. I spread the photographs across my kitchen table so many times that the edges began to curl. I studied every image. Every date. Every detail. Looking for a mistake. Looking for something that would prove Ethan had not betrayed me. Then another envelope arrived. This one was smaller. Inside was a handwritten note. Just one sentence. Ask him where he was on March 12th. No signature. No explanation. My hand shook as I read it. March 12th. I knew that date. Ethan had canceled dinner that night because of an emergency board meeting in New York. According to the documents sitting on my table, he had spent that evening somewhere else entirely. I told myself I needed answers. Real answers. So when Ethan appeared outside my apartment 2 days later, I finally opened the door. Relief flashed across his face so quickly it almost broke me. Olivia, he said softly. Thank God. He stepped forward, but I instinctively stepped back. The movement hurt him. I saw it immediately. What is happening? He asked. Why are you avoiding me? For a moment I almost told him everything. I almost showed him the envelopes. The photographs. The messages. Instead, I asked the question. Where were you on March 12th? Confusion crossed his face. Then surprise. March 12th? Answer me. He frowned slightly, trying to remember. New York. We had a board meeting that ran late. The answer came too quickly. Too naturally. Exactly what I expected him to say. My heart sank. Ethan noticed the change immediately. Olivia, what is this about? I wanted to believe him. More than anything. But trust is fragile. Once a crack appears, every doubt finds a way inside. Tears blurred my vision. I cannot do this anymore. His expression went completely still. Do what? Us. The word barely left my mouth. No. He shook his head immediately. No, something happened. Tell me what happened. I looked away because meeting his eyes felt impossible. If I looked too long, I would stay. If I stayed, I might forgive him without knowing the truth. And if the evidence was real, forgiveness would destroy me later. Please leave, Ethan. Silence filled the apartment. Heavy. Suffocating. Then I heard the sound that haunted me for years afterward. Not anger. Not frustration. Heartbreak. Pure and unmistakable heartbreak. If somebody told you something, he said quietly, let me explain. I closed my eyes. Goodbye, Ethan. Minutes later the door closed behind him. The apartment became silent. And for the first time since I met him, I felt completely alone. What I did not know was that 3 weeks later, everything was about to become far more complicated. Because a doctor was about to tell me something that would change the rest of my life. 3 weeks after Ethan walked out of my apartment, I sat alone in a small medical office staring at a piece of paper that refused to make sense. The doctor was still talking. Smiling gently. Explaining things she had probably explained hundreds of times before. I heard almost none of it. One sentence echoed through my mind again and again. You are pregnant. Outside the window, Boston moved normally. Cars filled the streets. People hurried to work. Life continued exactly as it had the day before. Yet nothing felt the same. My hand rested against my stomach as if doing so might somehow make the news feel real. Ethan's child. The realization hit me with equal parts joy and terror. For one brief moment, I considered calling him. Telling him everything. Asking him to come. Asking him to explain the questions that still haunted me. But then I remembered the photographs. The messages. The doubts. And fear won. Fear usually does. The next month became a blur of difficult choices. Ethan continued trying to reach me. Flowers arrived at my apartment. Letters appeared in my mailbox. Voicemails filled my phone. I listened to every single one. In each message he sounded more desperate than the last. Not angry. Not defensive. Just heartbroken. Sometimes he asked what he had done wrong. Sometimes he simply said he missed me. One night he left a message that nearly destroyed my resolve. Whatever happened, he said quietly, I will spend the rest of my life fixing it if you let me. I cried for hours after hearing it. Then I deleted the message anyway. Because if I allowed myself to believe him, I would never leave. And deep down I still feared discovering the evidence had been true all along. A week later another unexpected visitor arrived. Victoria Sterling. Ethan's mother. She appeared at my apartment without warning. Perfectly dressed. Perfectly composed. She looked around the tiny living room with polite curiosity before sitting across from me. I knew immediately that this was not a social visit. You care about Ethan, she said. Very much. I nodded cautiously. Then you should leave. The words landed harder than any accusation. I stared at her. Certain I had misheard. She folded her hands neatly. His life is complicated. His responsibilities are enormous. The future he faces requires someone different. Someone different. Such a polite way of saying someone else. I felt humiliation burn through me. Does Ethan know you are here? I asked. For the first time, something unreadable flickered across her face. This conversation is between us. That answer told me everything. When she finally left, the apartment felt colder than before. I spent the entire night awake. Thinking. Crying. Questioning everything. By sunrise, I made a decision that would define the next 6 years. I sold what little I owned. Ended my lease. Changed my phone number. Packed my life into the back of a used sedan. And without telling anyone except Emily, I disappeared. As the city faded in my rearview mirror, I looked at the ultrasound photograph resting on the passenger seat. Then I whispered the promise that would guide every choice I made afterward. I do not know how to protect myself anymore. But I will protect you. The first year was survival. Nothing more. I settled in a small town in Vermont where nobody knew my name and nobody cared about my past. The mountains surrounded everything. Quiet roads. Small stores. Familiar faces. It was the kind of place where people waved from their porches and remembered your coffee order after meeting you once. I rented a modest house on the edge of town and found work teaching art classes at a community center. The pay was modest. The life was simple. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. Then Lily arrived. The moment they placed her in my arms, the world shifted. Every fear. Every regret. Every doubt. None of it disappeared, but it suddenly had competition. She had Ethan's eyes. I noticed it immediately. Green. Bright. Curious. Every time she looked at me, I saw a piece of the man I had left behind. Sometimes that comforted me. Sometimes it broke my heart. As Lily grew, so did the questions I tried to avoid. Was Ethan still searching? Had he moved on? Had he married someone else? The internet made it impossible to completely escape him. Every few months his face appeared somewhere. Business magazines. Interviews. Charity events. Headlines about new acquisitions and record profits. Yet there was always something missing from the photographs. The smile I remembered. He looked successful. Powerful. Untouchable. He did not look happy. One evening, when Lily was almost 3 years old, Emily called. Her voice sounded strange. Hesitant. Olivia, there is something you need to know. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What happened? There was a long pause. Ethan never stopped looking for you. I closed my eyes. Emily. I am serious. He hired investigators. He searched every city where you had family. Every state where you ever lived. He even funded missing persons programs. My heart pounded. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. I sat in silence while Lily colored pictures at the kitchen table. A little girl completely unaware that her life had been shaped by secrets. Emily continued. He thought something happened to you. The words hit harder than I expected. Because until that moment, I had always assumed Ethan believed I left by choice. That he eventually accepted it. That he recovered. He never recovered, Emily said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. After the call ended, I sat awake long after midnight. Snow drifted past the windows. The house was silent except for the ticking clock above the fireplace. For the first time in years, doubt pointed in a different direction. What if I had been wrong? What if the photographs had been lies? What if Ethan had spent all these years suffering because of a decision I made? I wanted answers. But life rarely waits until people are ready. 3 months later, a severe winter storm swept across the region. Roads closed. Power lines failed. Communication became unreliable. For 2 days the town disappeared beneath ice and snow. When the storm finally passed, news spread quickly. Several vehicles had gone off the highway during the worst of the weather. Names circulated. Rumors followed. Mistakes multiplied. Somewhere inside that confusion, a report surfaced carrying my old name. Olivia Carter. Deceased. And before anyone realized the error, the story reached Ethan Sterling. For Ethan, the mistake became reality before anyone had the chance to correct it. The report reached one of the investigators he had hired years earlier. A woman matching my age. My old name attached to the file. A location connected to the region where I had disappeared. By the time questions surfaced, grief had already taken root. Emily called me the morning she learned what happened. I still remember her voice. Breathless. Panicked. You need to sit down. Lily was eating cereal across the kitchen table, humming softly while drawing flowers on a paper napkin. I smiled at her before stepping into the hallway. What is wrong? Emily hesitated. Then she told me everything. Ethan believed I was dead. At first I thought she was joking. Then I heard her crying. My stomach dropped. The walls seemed to tilt around me. How? I whispered. Emily explained the confusion. The incorrect report. The assumptions. The chain of mistakes nobody caught quickly enough. By the end of the call, my hands were shaking. I could not stop picturing Ethan receiving the news. Could not stop imagining the expression on his face. The silence that must have followed. The unbearable finality of it. That evening I sat alone on the porch after Lily went to bed. Snow covered the yard in a blanket of silver. The sky was clear for the first time in days. Above me, thousands of stars filled the darkness. I should have felt relieved. The light created distance. Safety. Closure. Instead I felt sick. Because Ethan had spent years searching for answers. And now he believed he finally had one. The next week Emily called again. This time her voice sounded quieter. Sadder. There was a service. I closed my eyes. I already knew what she meant. He organized it himself, she continued. He handled everything. My chest tightened. Was anyone there? Hundreds. The answer somehow made it worse. Ethan had built an entire goodbye around a woman who was still alive. Around me. Every detail haunted me. The flowers. The memorial. The speeches. The photographs. The impossible image of Ethan standing beside an empty grave. Weeks passed. Then months. Life continued the way life always does. Lily started first grade. I painted more. Worked more. Smiled more. At least on the outside. But something had changed. Every night after Lily fell asleep, I found myself searching online. Looking for Ethan. Reading interviews. Watching charity appearances. Studying photographs. He looked thinner. More distant. As though some invisible light had disappeared behind his eyes. One evening a reporter asked whether he planned to remarry. Ethan smiled politely before answering. Some people only get one great love. The interview ended seconds later. But those words followed me for days. Because despite everything that happened, despite every mistake, every misunderstanding, every year apart, one terrifying truth refused to leave me alone. Ethan Sterling still loved me. And for the first time in 6 years, I began wondering whether disappearing had been the biggest mistake of my life. Spring arrived slowly that year. Snow melted from the hillsides. The trees outside my studio filled with fresh green leaves. Life should have felt lighter. Instead, every passing week seemed to increase the weight I carried. I thought about Ethan constantly. Not because I wanted to. Because memories had become impossible to silence. Lily noticed it too. Children always do. One Saturday morning she looked up from her coloring book and asked a question that nearly stopped my heart. Mom, do I have a dad? The room went silent. I set down my coffee cup and forced myself to smile. Yes, sweetheart. She tilted her head. Where is he? I stared at the sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. How was I supposed to explain 6 years of fear, mistakes, and misunderstandings to a 7-year-old girl? He lives far away, I finally said. Lily seemed satisfied with that answer. Children often accept simple explanations. Adults are the ones who complicate everything. Later that month, the community center organized its annual spring art exhibition. Students displayed paintings. Local artists contributed work. Families wandered through the galleries eating cookies and pretending to understand abstract art. I almost skipped the event. Then one of my students convinced me to submit a painting. The piece showed a small white house surrounded by wildflowers beneath a cloudy sky. Hidden near the corner was a tiny blue window. The same symbol I had painted for years. The same symbol Ethan once noticed before anyone else. The exhibition lasted only one weekend. By Monday morning, I had already forgotten about it. Ethan had not. 3 states away, a junior executive from Sterling Global attended the exhibition while visiting family. He purchased several pieces from local artists, including mine. When he returned to New York, the paintings were delivered to corporate headquarters as decoration for a new office floor. Nobody thought twice about it. Until Ethan walked past one of them. According to what I later learned, he stopped immediately. Employees continued moving around him. Meetings continued. Phones rang. Yet Ethan stood perfectly still staring at the painting hanging on the wall. Specifically, at the small blue window hidden in the corner. Most people would never have noticed it. Ethan did. Because years earlier he had asked me why I painted windows into everything. The executive later said Ethan looked as though he had seen a ghost. Within an hour he had requested the artist information. By evening he had the gallery records. By midnight he had the name I used in Vermont. Not Olivia Carter. Another name. Another identity. Yet something about it felt wrong. Too recent. Too convenient. The following morning, Ethan made a phone call to the gallery owner. Then another. Then another. Piece by piece, the trail began forming. A small town. A community center. An art teacher. A woman with green eyes. Meanwhile, I spent that same afternoon helping Lily plant flowers in our front yard, completely unaware that 6 years of distance were beginning to collapse. For the first time since I disappeared, Ethan Sterling was no longer searching blindly. He had found a thread. And unlike everyone else, Ethan had never been the kind of man who let go once he found something worth holding on to. The day everything changed looked completely ordinary. The sky was clear. The air smelled like freshly cut grass. Children laughed on the playground behind the community center while parents sat on benches pretending not to worry about anything. I was carrying a box of paint supplies across the parking lot when my phone rang. Emily. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. Olivia, she said, breathless. Do not panic. Nobody has ever spoken those words and achieved the desired result. My heart immediately began racing. What happened? Silence. Then a single sentence. I think Ethan found you. The box slipped slightly in my hands. What? Someone from Sterling Global contacted the gallery owner. My pulse pounded in my ears. Are you sure? Yes. I stopped walking. Cars moved through the parking lot. Children ran across the field. The entire world continued as normal while mine tilted sideways. 6 years. 6 years of distance. 6 years of silence. 6 years spent convincing myself that seeing Ethan again would never happen. And now he was closer than ever. That night I barely slept. Every sound outside the house made me glance toward the window. Every passing car felt significant. Rationally, I knew Ethan could not simply appear overnight. Vermont was not around the corner from Manhattan. Yet anxiety does not listen to reason. It listens to fear. The next morning Lily and I visited a local farmer's market. She skipped beside me carrying a basket twice too large for her small arms. Her dark blonde hair bounced with every step. She looked so much like Ethan sometimes it hurt. We were standing beside a flower stand when Lily suddenly stopped walking. Mom. I looked down. What is it? She pointed across the street. That man keeps looking at us. My stomach tightened. Slowly I followed her gaze. A tall man stood near the corner beside a black SUV. For one terrifying second I thought it was Ethan. It was not. Just a stranger checking his phone. Relief flooded through me so quickly I nearly laughed. But the moment stayed with me. Because deep down I knew something had already changed. 2 days later, it happened. The community center hosted an outdoor art class in the town square. Easels lined the sidewalk. Paint splattered across folding tables. Local musicians played nearby. It felt like every other Saturday. Until I looked up. At first I thought I was imagining him. The figure stood nearly 50 yards away near a bookstore window. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dark suit despite the casual setting. Motionless. Watching. My breath disappeared. Ethan. 6 years vanished in an instant. The distance between us felt both enormous and non-existent. He looked older. More serious. Yet unmistakably the same man. The same green eyes. The same quiet intensity. For several seconds neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The sounds of the town square faded into nothing. There was only him. Only me. Only 6 years of unanswered questions standing between us. Then Ethan took a single step forward. And my entire world stopped breathing. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could not breathe. I could not think. 6 years of memories crashed into me all at once. The coffee shop in Boston. The late-night phone calls. The promises. The heartbreak. The funeral. Ethan stopped a few feet away. His eyes searched my face as if he were afraid I might disappear again if he blinked. "Olivia," he said. Just my name. Nothing more. Yet hearing it in his voice nearly shattered me. Nobody had said my name like that in 6 years. I swallowed hard. Ethan. The sound of children laughing echoed from somewhere behind us. A dog barked across the street. The world continued moving while we stood frozen inside a moment that felt impossible. His eyes glistened slightly. Not with anger. Not with resentment. Relief. Pure relief. "You are alive." The words came out almost as a whisper. I looked away. Shame settled heavily in my chest. "Yes." Ethan laughed once. A broken sound. The kind people make when they have exhausted every other emotion. "I stood at your grave." My heart sank. "I know." His expression changed. Confusion replacing relief. "You know?" I nodded slowly. "I was there." Silence. Complete silence. Ethan stared at me as if I had spoken another language. "You were there?" I could barely meet his eyes. I watched from a distance. He looked away toward the mountains surrounding the town. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled slowly. 6 years, Olivia." There was no accusation in his voice. Somehow that made it worse. "I know. 6 years of searching." My eyes filled with tears. "I know. 6 years thinking I failed you." The pain behind those words hit harder than anything else. Because suddenly I understood something I had never allowed myself to consider. While I spent years believing Ethan betrayed me, Ethan spent those same years believing he lost me. We had both been suffering inside completely different versions of the same tragedy. "Why?" he finally asked. The question I feared most. "Why did you leave? Why did you disappear? Why did you never come back?" I opened my mouth. Closed it. Then opened it again. "Because I thought you betrayed me." Ethan frowned. Genuine confusion crossing his face. "What?" Tears slipped down my cheeks. "The photographs. The messages. The evidence." He stared at me. Completely stunned. "Olivia, what evidence?" I described the envelopes. The pictures. The anonymous notes. Every detail I could remember. With each sentence, Ethan's expression darkened. Not with anger toward me. With realization. When I finished speaking, he looked as though a missing piece of a puzzle had finally fallen into place. "My God," he whispered. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thin folder. He handed it to me. 3 months ago, I hired a forensic investigator to review every unexplained event connected to your disappearance. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were reports. Emails. Financial records. Evidence. Real evidence. One name appeared again and again across the pages. Victoria Sterling. Ethan's mother. I felt the blood drain from my face. No, I whispered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. She admitted everything last month. The town square seemed to disappear around me. 6 years. 6 years lost because of a lie. And for the first time since Ethan stepped back into my life, I realized the truth might hurt even more than the betrayal ever did. My hands would not stop shaking. The folder felt heavier than paper should feel. Every page confirmed the same impossible truth. The photographs had been fabricated. The messages manipulated. The anonymous notes orchestrated. Years of heartbreak traced back to a single source. Victoria Sterling. I sat down on a nearby bench because my legs suddenly felt unreliable. Ethan remained standing a few feet away, giving me space. Not because he wanted distance. Because 6 years had taught him patience. She confessed everything, he said quietly. After the funeral. I stared at the documents. Why? The question sounded small compared to the damage it represented. Ethan looked toward the town square. Children played near the fountain. Couples walked between shops. Ordinary life continued around us. She thought she was protecting me. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. By destroying us? Ethan nodded once. She believed you would hold me back. She thought I would choose you over the company. Over the future she spent decades building. Tears blurred the words on the page. 6 years. Birthdays. Holidays. First steps. School plays. Lost moments. All stolen by someone's fear disguised as love. I closed the folder and looked up at Ethan. For the first time since seeing him again, I truly saw the weight he carried. The exhaustion. The grief. The years. We had both suffered. Neither of us had won. Before I could speak, a familiar voice called out from across the square. Mom. My entire body froze. Lily. She ran toward us carrying a paper bag from the bakery, her smile bright enough to light the entire afternoon. My heart stopped. Ethan turned instinctively toward the sound. Lily slowed as she approached, noticing the stranger standing beside me. Her green eyes lifted to his face. Ethan stared back. Neither of them spoke. For one impossible moment, they simply looked at each other. The resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes. The same expression when curious. The same slight tilt of the head. I watched realization begin forming behind Ethan's gaze. Slowly. Carefully. Like sunrise breaking over a horizon. Olivia, he whispered. My chest tightened. There was no hiding anymore. No running. No second identity. No distance. Just truth. I looked at Lily. Then back at Ethan. Tears filled my eyes. Her name is Lily. Ethan's expression changed completely. Hope. Fear. Wonder. Every emotion imaginable appearing at once. Lily smiled politely. Hi. Ethan looked like he had forgotten how to breathe. Hi. His voice cracked slightly. Lily glanced between us. Mom, who is he? The question hung in the air. 7 years of silence balanced on a single answer. I swallowed hard. Ethan never looked away from her. Not even for a second. Sweetheart, I said softly, reaching for her hand. This is Ethan. Lily waited. Children always know when adults are avoiding the important part. And, she asked. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Across from me, Ethan's eyes filled too. For years I imagined this moment. Feared it. Avoided it. Yet when it finally arrived, the truth felt simpler than every lie that came before it. I squeezed Lily's hand gently and whispered the words that changed all 3 of our lives forever. He is your father. For a second, nobody moved. Lily looked at me. Then at Ethan. then back at me again. Children have a remarkable ability to accept truths that adults spend years fighting. My father? She asked softly. I nodded. Ethan stood frozen beside the bench, his eyes never leaving her face. Years of success had prepared him for negotiations, crises, and impossible decisions. None of it prepared him for this. Lily studied him carefully. Then she smiled. A small, uncertain smile. You have my eyes. Ethan laughed through tears. The sound was warm and broken at the same time. I was just thinking the same thing. That afternoon lasted hours and minutes all at once. We sat together beneath the spring sunshine while Lily asked questions only a child would think to ask. What was his favorite color? Did he like pancakes? Could he draw? Ethan answered every one as if the answers mattered more than anything else in the world. Maybe they did. For the first time, I saw something return to him. Not power. Not confidence. Joy. Pure joy. As the weeks passed, healing arrived quietly. There was no dramatic moment. No magical solution. Just conversations. Honest ones. Long walks through town. Difficult questions finally answered. Ethan told me everything he had learned about his mother's deception. How she eventually admitted the truth. How regret followed. How he spent years blaming himself for losing me. I told him about Lily's first steps. Her first day of school. The nights I cried after she fell asleep because I wished she could know her father. The pain of those lost years never disappeared completely. Some wounds become part of who we are. But they no longer controlled us. One evening near the end of summer, Ethan joined Lily and me beside the lake outside town. The sunset painted the water gold. Lily chased fireflies along the shore while laughter echoed through the warm evening air. Ethan stood beside me watching her. I missed everything, he said quietly. You missed a lot. He nodded. I can never get those years back. I looked at him. The old version of Ethan would have tried to fix the problem. Solve it. Control it. Instead, he simply accepted the truth. No, I said softly. But you are here now. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then Ethan did something completely unexpected. He stepped in front of me and slowly lowered himself to one knee. My heart stopped. Across the lake, the last light of day shimmered on the water. Ethan looked up at me, his eyes full of emotion. This is not a proposal, he said. Not today. Tears filled my eyes immediately. Then what are you doing? His voice trembled. The one thing I should have done years ago. He lowered his head. I am sorry, Olivia. Sorry I did not find you sooner. Sorry I let other people stand between us. Sorry for every day you faced alone. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Ethan had spent 6 years searching for me. I had spent 6 years hiding from him. In the end, neither of us needed revenge. Neither of us needed someone to win. We only needed the truth. Behind us, Lily's laughter floated across the water like music. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt bigger than the past.